this story about this girl called Jodie. When she was 6 years old, she and the neighbours' children were playing in the backyard with her brothers. Their mother was inside having a coffee and chatting with their mother. At one point, she ran inside to get a drink of water. And as she was getting the drink, she heard a name through the other door where the mothers were talking. And she just quietly crept over to listen. And she heard the most revealing and horrific comments by her mum, made by her mother. The most horrific comments that a mother could make. Her mother said, "You know, I've never really loved Jodie. She repulses me and I can't stand to touch her. I wish she'd never been born." There may have been more, but that was more than enough to traumatise this young girl. She hid away and cried and cried and cried. And over the next weeks and months, she realised more and more that what her mother said was true, that her mother hugged her brothers and touched them, but she refused to touch her and even pushed her away. The anger and hatred built up in her, and also a self-loathing that this girl, obviously she was not lovable, not someone no one could love. Her life, I guess, spiralled out of control with this trauma that was oppressive of body, mind and spirit. I mean, it had implications in her body, the way she lived out self-harm, poor relationships that were destructive, and just feelings of being worthless. The adult Jodie says, "You know, I was on a journey looking for something, but I don't even know what I was looking for. Was it love? Was it a place to belong? Was it worthiness? I don't know. I was just on this spiraling out of control journey, hurtling down the road, creating chaos in myself, filled with anger and hatred of myself, my parents and everything and everyone." And then she talks about two people, that her lives intersected with two people, Charles and Jill. And they were different. They embraced her. They welcomed her in. They sat and listened to her story. They held her and cried with her. They took her seriously. And they affirmed her at every point as someone who is lovable and lovely. They prayed with her. They introduced her to their friends from church. And she was included into their lives. At every point, she was loved. And this love of a God that she didn't know was declared, that she was a child of God, beloved and lovely. And it took a while for the oppression of the trauma to dissipate and drop away, for her to feel the release. But she came to the point where she said, "You know, I've discovered I love being alive and I love being me, and that I am a valuable, worthwhile person, and I am loved. And I'm loved by God. And I feel the best I ever have, and I'm living the life that I never believed possible." And even some of that anger, that hatred that I felt from my parents is dissipating and going. I thought of that story this week when I read Luke's story of Jesus. A similar kind of a story where there's this woman who has been bent over with this affliction. She's crippled, and the Greek word is athenia, and it means weakness. She is so weak she can't lift herself up. She can't lift her body up, and she's bent over, crippled. And because of this illness, this affliction that they attribute to evil, to evil spirits, or she can't participate in the life. She can't because she's sick, but she's pushed to the margins. An invisible person on the edges of life, much like Jodie. Ignored and avoided and despised. Well, one day she walks into a synagogue, a religious space, maybe for a place to rest, maybe to hear some words of hope, maybe to connect with this Jewish faith that's hers, but from which she's been excluded. And she hears this rabbi talking, and when he looks up, he sees her. She's probably snuck in and hidden at the back, but he sees her and he calls her forward. And there he listens to her story, and he lays hands on her and he prays for her. And what it says is not that he heals her, but that he releases her. He releases her from this spirit that binds her up, this crippling spirit that gives weakness to her body and causes her to bend over. She's released and she rises up and she has strength in her body. And people begin to praise God. But then the ruler and the leaders of this synagogue are concerned and angry because Jesus has taken control. That this Jesus who is preaching is now controlled and taking over, and people who are outcasts and on the fringes are allowed in, and there's release and healing in their space on the Sabbath day, and that's not allowed. And the leader speaks up and says, you should not be doing this. This is not allowed. There are 6 days in which there must be work. This is the Sabbath. It is a day of rest and there should be no work. If you want to be healed, come back one of the other days. And he goes on, quoting their laws, their religious laws out of the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, particularly Deuteronomy 5, these laws of the Sabbath, and rigid, held tight. He's angry. He's angry that his control, his authority, his power has been transgressed, pushed aside. That this rabbi and this outcast woman have taken centre stage. And there's chaos. I mean, what if everyone who wants healing comes in here on the Sabbath day and disrupts him? And what will they do? Where will the control and the order be when people who are on the fringes, marginalised people, come in and want a centre position, want to be part of who we are? And Jesus responds to him and says, "You hypocrites, you absolute hypocrites. Yeah, the law does talk about the Sabbath, but does it not always say, you who have animals who are locked away at night, don't you let them out to water them and feed them on the Sabbath? Is that not allowed? Then why not this child of God, this daughter of Abraham, who has been afflicted for 18 years? Why should she not be allowed to receive release and freedom and life on the Sabbath?" Remembering that the Sabbath too is not just about rest, it's about the celebration of liberation and freedom. We were given freedom by God from the Egyptians when we were oppressed slaves. And we celebrate that. We celebrate that in part on the Sabbath. Isn't this what God's all about? Bringing release and freedom and life to people. Releasing them from the evil that holds them. And what better day than on the Sabbath when we're praising and worshipping God? God is not a God of rules and laws. God is not a God of belief systems tied up in what's right and wrong and judging and exclusive and keeping people away. God is about bringing people together, bringing release from oppression, freedom and hope and life. Just like Jody received. Life in its fullness. And that's what this is about. God is about freedom and peace and life. And where religious leaders use their laws and their rules and their power and authority to maintain order and control over people and keep them locked away in oppressive ways, or when politicians or corporate leaders or leaders in communities or even in families control people and use their power over them and oppress them and keep them tightly bound. That's evil. It doesn't matter who does it. It's not of God, it's evil. And Jesus said God is a God of freedom and release, who opens up, who brings hope and joy and life, who acts in love and compassion and kindness. This story challenges us. It challenges us at every point because we like to have control of our own lives and order in our own lives and order in community and society. And people find their place and we like to keep people in their place. But if people are released from their place where they're controlled and pushed down, what will the world be like? A chaotic mass of love and hope and people doing their thing and treading on each other's toes a bit, but finding life together in this world that's beautiful and wondrous, where there's enough for everyone. That's the dream of God, and that's what Jesus delivered on this day. And that's what Jill and Charles and their friends gave to Jody. And that's what we're invited to give to the world, to participate in this life of freedom and hope, a life of life and joy and peace. Will you join in this dream, this way of God, in the way of Jesus?